it's no longer just about a tech problem. It's more about how do we keep up with the evolving trends and how do we churn out solutions that are verified and have the necessary guardrails. There must be a constant evolution of your target operating model.
So let's move on then and talk about the target operating model that supports the requirements. And if this is the direction of travel, and it clearly is, what are the challenges that we're seeing today in existing target operating models and their ability to support the changes that we anticipate?
Yeah, maybe I can just share from my perspective, right? I think we're working with various banks right now in large transformation programs where they feel it's no longer just about a tech problem. It's more about how do we keep up with the evolving trends and how do we churn out solutions that are verified and have the necessary guardrails. If you think about the product evolution in private banking, I think we've seen the big shift towards Bitcoin and blockchain, right? We saw the rise and fall of NFTs. So the banking industry hasn't even managed to catch up with that trend before it actually fell again. And I think the latest trend I see is let's take tokenization, fractured investments into real estate, right? So I'm wondering how fast can a bank adapt to all of these changes? How do you bring the value to your clients without diluting your proposition and actually doing it properly with the necessary regulatory support? So these questions I get a lot from our banks to see how we can support them. And I think my standard answer is there must be a constant evolution of your target operating model. It's no longer a fire and forget. You don't do it one time and then you're good for the next 5 years. I think that mode has gone, right? So there's a constant reevaluation of the target operating model and see what do you prioritize next. And it's much more agile than we used to see 5 years ago. So maybe question to you as well, Adam, do you see it the same way? And how does the bank cope with that constant change?
So I guess because my domain is more on the investment advisory side, I would say not to disparage, but if you begin with tech, you will end up with more tech.
Yes.
And I think for us, where we started with was not tech. We asked, what is the experience and the information we want to deliver to RMs, to clients? And then we ask, how can tech enable us to do these different things? So for example, when we were exploring LLMs and Gen AI, the answer was not use the LLM to do the investment advisory reasoning. That would have been the false start, right? It was, what is best-in-class advisory look like? How can we codify this, right? And then we built that first. And then we looked at along the value chain, how do you ease the friction points and the bottlenecks where different types of tech are best suited to solve those problems. So I would say maybe the shift is that this has to happen fairly quickly nowadays. You have to iterate more because things are changing very quickly. And so, for example, in my own team, we're now staffed up with data scientists and an AI engineer because these are tools that are really important. Data scientists to understand the data first approach, not an heuristic he said, she said approach, but looking at real data, real trends, and real prediction to help us do our judgment. You need an AI engineer because for all the things we discussed about the ways that AI can go wrong, there are also many ways in which it can go right. And knowing the difference and how and when to deploy is why we need those kinds of skills. But at the core of it is actually, I think, for the specialists, the advisors, the RMs to know their job inside out. And AI is just a lever. They are the fulcrum, right? And AI is the lever that multiplies their knowledge.
Okay, interesting. So your approach has been to start with the service offering and then consider the technology only once you understand what you want the service offering to be.
Yeah, so it's a period of more reflective soul searching. We've always done this work, right? But now that you're faced with the possibility that you can scale this work like never before, then you start to think about what are the actual workflows and how you can break them down and how you can streamline certain components.
So from a vendor perspective, you're probably looking at a wider landscape now and considering more kind of point solutions to solve very specific problems as opposed to some of the older legacy relationships that you might have had?
I think maybe it's a bit more of an open architecture approach, also because things have been modularized, right? So you can always plug in APIs with different vendors, different services and solutions. That doesn't mean that you're locked into one system. It also doesn't mean that you're constantly changing. But I think the framework now is more on what suits different workflows rather than being locked into one ecosystem.
What challenges does that represent from for a bank today that needs to make that step, make that transformation to this new operating model?
Yeah, I think I see two things right now. So one is, you're right, there's still a lot of legacy architecture, legacy applications in place that are not API ready, they're not API enabled. So these are some basic fundamental issues that I still see in big banks. Number two, as Adam already said, applications have become more modular. More capabilities are spread out in different applications. And this works if you have an open architecture, if you have open API architecture, which also means that we see a big rise of fintechs coming in. So you have more choice, which also means you have more to think about and more to evaluate. And I see that burden being shifted towards the IT team. So it's no longer a buy versus build question. Once you have decided on buy, there's a plethora of choice that you have to choose from. I think the RFP cycles have extended much more, because there's also a question of, am I just solving for this particular problem? Or is this solution good enough that it can be expanded to other areas?
Yeah.
And I think this also goes back to that idea that if you put the workflow first, right, then you have clarity on what solutions you actually need.
Yeah.
And because it's modularized and if you break down your workflow well, it's easy to match specific services to specific outcomes. But without that clarity, then I think you do get a bit of a paralysis of analysis.
That's right.